I slammed the brakes so hard my duffel bag toppled from the passenger seat. There it was, staked right into the middle of my front lawn, a gleaming "For Sale" sign, bright red letters cutting against the faded winter grass like a warning flare. I sat there for a long second, gripping the steering wheel, my pulse hammering in my ears. The last time I saw that house, I'd kissed the siding like some lovesick fool before deployment. Now? Now, it was being hawked to strangers like a used car. This wasn't the homecoming I'd pictured. I'd imagined maybe my neighbor Thompson waving from his porch, or Dana across the street dropping off a plate of cookies, her usual way of saying, "Welcome back." Instead, all I got was the cold glint of aluminum letters and the distant hum of a lawnmower somewhere down the block. I climbed out of the truck, boots crunching over the curb, and stared at the sign as if glaring hard enough might erase it. The air smelled of cut grass and distant charcoal, normal suburban life rolling on, oblivious to the fact that my property had apparently been put up for grabs. That's when I heard the click of heels on pavement. "Ah, Sergeant Walker," came the syrupy voice I remembered too well. Linda Prescott, HOA President, Maplewood Meadows Subdivision monarch, and the self-proclaimed guardian of community standards. She wore her usual armor, pressed white blouse, pearls, clipboard tucked under one arm like it was a weapon. "Welcome home," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I was hoping we'd run into each other. "Linda," I managed, jaw tight. "Care to explain why there's a real estate sign on my lawn?" Her smile widened, almost gleeful. "Oh, that. Well, given your prolonged absence, the board voted to consider the property abandoned. We couldn't risk blight or declining property values, so it was listed preemptively." I blinked. Abandoned? I was deployed overseas. The military doesn't exactly let me drop in for lawn maintenance every weekend. Linda tilted her head. "We have bylaws to protect the neighborhood. Section 12.4 states properties left unattended for more than 6 months may be subject to intervention by the association. We followed procedure." Her tone was calm, rehearsed, like she'd been waiting to recite that line. Behind her, I noticed curtains twitch. Neighbors were watching, of course. They always did. Maplewood had this way of closing ranks whenever Linda flexed her power, half horrified, half unwilling to challenge her. Dana's voice drifted from across the street, low and urgent as she whispered to her husband. "He's back. Oh my God, he's actually back." I turned my eyes back on Linda. "So, let me get this straight. I fight for my country, and you sell my house out from under me because the grass got too long?" She sniffed, unbothered. "You have to understand, Sergeant. Community cohesion is delicate. Standards must be upheld. We couldn't risk letting Maplewood Meadows decline." I almost laughed. Decline? This was the same woman who once fined Thompson $75 for leaving his trash bin out 12 hours past pickup. The same woman who stormed onto my porch 3 years ago because my Christmas lights stayed up until January 6th. Decline wasn't the problem. Control was. I stepped closer, close enough to see the smug little crease in the corner of her smile. "Linda, let me be very clear. That house is mine. It's protected by federal law, and you've made one hell of a mistake." Something flickered across her face, just for a second, a crack in the armor. Then it was gone. She tapped her clipboard. "You're free to bring this up at the next HOA meeting, but the sale has already been initiated. Papers were filed. We'll see what the court thinks." She pivoted on her heels and walked off, as calm as if she just discussed a garden club bake sale. I stood there in the fading light, fists clenched, heat rising in my chest. Around me, the street returned to its eerie normalcy. Kids on bikes coasting down the sidewalk, sprinklers hissing to life, the faint scent of burgers on a neighbor's grill. Life went on, but for me, everything had tilted sideways. Because this wasn't just about bylaws. This wasn't about long grass or mailboxes or Christmas lights. Linda Prescott had declared war, and I wasn't about to lose the ground I fought to come home to. As I yanked the "For Sale" sign out of my lawn and tossed it onto the curb, I caught Dana's gaze from across the street. She mouthed, "Careful," then shut her curtains. Careful? Linda Prescott had no idea who she was dealing with. "The sale is final," Linda declared, smacking her gavel down like she was presiding over the fate of nations. And then the door opened. 2 uniformed JAG officers stepped into the cramped clubhouse, their boots echoing off the tile. Linda's triumphant smile froze in place, her binder of bylaws trembling just slightly in her grip. For once, it wasn't her rules filling the room, it was mine. You could feel the neighbors lean forward in their folding chairs. The smell of burnt coffee from the back counter mingled with the faint tang of nervous sweat. The HOA meetings were usually a dreary affair, complaints about weeds, arguments about mailbox paint, the occasional shouting match over pool access. But tonight was different. Tonight, Linda Prescott was about to find out what happens when a suburban queen bee tries to sting a soldier. Let me back up a second. The week after I tore that "for sale" sign out of my lawn, I went straight to work. Deployment had taught me 2 things: patience and preparation. And if there's one thing you don't do, it's go into battle without a plan. I hit the base legal office first, sat across from a captain who knew the Service Member Civil Relief Act backward and forward. He walked me through every protection, every precedent, every scrap of paperwork that guaranteed no HOA could sell my property while I was overseas. Then I dug into county records, pulling every document Linda had filed. Sloppy signatures, missing notarizations, even a misstated motion. It was all there. She'd rushed the process, confident nobody would check. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, my binder was thicker than hers. And let me tell you, that meeting smelled like fear before it even began. Neighbors filed in, some clutching their latest violation letters. Dana whispered to Thompson, "She fined me for wind chimes. Can you believe that?" Thompson muttered back, "She threatened to lien my house over dandelions." Everyone had a story, everyone had a grudge, but no one had dared stand up until now. Linda strutted to the front, turquoise blazer sparkling under the fluorescent lights. She tapped her binder like a magician about to pull a rabbit from a hat. "As president of Maplewood Meadows HOA, I'm pleased to report the Walker property has been successfully processed for sale. Our community is stronger for it." That's when I stood. The scrape of my chair cut through the silence. "Actually, Linda," I said, voice steady, "you might want to hold off on your victory lap." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" The door swung open behind me. The 2 JAG officers entered, crisp uniforms immaculate, carrying folders marked with the insignia of the United States military. You could practically hear the collective inhale of 20 neighbors all at once. One officer nodded politely. "Good evening. We're here on behalf of Sergeant Walker." Linda laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "This is a private homeowners association meeting. You can't just barge in here." The taller officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, we're here to present federal protections under the Service Member Civil Relief Act. Any attempt to seize or sell property belonging to an active duty service member without due process is null and void." Murmurs rippled through the room. Dana's eyes widened. Thompson leaned back with a grin spreading across his face. I held up my own folder, thick with documents. County records, deployment orders, signed affidavits, every scrap of proof that what you did was not only wrong, but illegal. Linda's face went pale, though she tried to mask it with a smirk. "We acted in accordance with HOA bylaws." The shorter officer leaned forward, voice calm but cutting. "Your bylaws don't supersede federal law, ma'am." The room erupted in whispers. Someone chuckled. Someone else clapped just once before the sound was swallowed by the tension. Linda's hand trembled as she gripped her gavel. "Order! I demand order." But the order was already gone. Neighbors started speaking up, voices stronger than I'd ever heard at one of these meetings. "You fined me for painting my shutters beige. You threatened foreclosure over my dogwood tree. You bulldozed his ramp while he was deployed. It was like a dam breaking. Years of petty fines and threats came flooding out. The faces around me, once so cowed, now glowed with a strange new energy: relief, anger, hope. Linda banged her gavel again, but it sounded pathetic, like a toy hammer against a hurricane. "These accusations are baseless. This is insubordination." "Insubordination," I said, letting the word hang in the air. "This isn't the army, Linda. You're not a commander. You're just a woman with a clipboard and a craving for control." The room erupted again, this time with laughter. Nervous, giddy, contagious laughter. For the first time, the queen bee had lost her sting. But as the officers laid the final document on the table, a legal notice stamped with the federal seal, I caught the look in Linda's eyes. Anger. Pure, festering anger. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. And as the neighbors buzzed around me, whispering about change and finally breaking free, I knew this battle was only the beginning. Linda Prescott wasn't the type to surrender. She'd regroup. She'd strike back. And I had to be ready. The rumble of diesel engines at sunrise shook the street awake before the sun had even cleared the rooftops. I stepped out onto my porch just in time to see two olive-drab trucks crawl into the subdivision, their hazard lights flashing. Soldiers hopped down with clipboards and survey tape, calm as clockwork, while my neighbors clustered in bathrobes and slippers, coffee mugs trembling in their hands. And there, at the center of it all, was Linda Prescott, her precious clipboard sagging in her grip like a sword she could no longer lift. The air was electric, thick with exhaust fumes and disbelief. For years, Linda had run this neighborhood like a fiefdom, handing out fines for untrimmed hedges and unauthorized garden gnomes. Now, she stood slack-jawed as the military, actual, uniformed military, began marking the curbs she once lorded over. Kids pressed their noses to window glass. A golden retriever barked from a porch. Nobody quite believed what they were seeing. And maybe that's why I grinned, just a little. Because Linda had finally picked a fight too big to win. The backstory went like this. When she pushed that fraudulent sale through, Linda had no idea that part of the subdivision sat on land still tied up in a decades-old military easement. My property had been carved out of a parcel once leased to the Department of Defense, paperwork so dense even the county clerk probably never finished reading it. By trying to sell abandoned property that wasn't hers to sell, Linda triggered the very clause that handed jurisdiction back to the government. In simple terms, she'd sold land she didn't own, and when the feds came knocking, they didn't ask politely. They repossessed. I could see the realization hit her in real time. This is a misunderstanding," she stammered, scurrying toward the soldiers. Her turquoise blazer looked out of place next to their uniforms. "This is private property. This is Maplewood Meadows, and I am the duly elected president." One soldier didn't even look up from his notes. "Ma'am, this subdivision's common areas, roadways, and certain parcels are now under federal repossession order. Please stand aside." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, the words sinking in like stones dropped into water. Roads, utilities, common areas. All the things Linda had used as leverage. The pool gate codes, the tennis court reservations, the power to decide who got fined and who didn't, all slipping out of her manicured hands. "Hold on," Dana whispered, clutching her robe. "Does that mean she can't shut down my wind chimes anymore?" "Or my shed," Thompson added, a smile twitching at the corners of his mouth. I stepped forward, my voice steady enough to cut through the murmurs. "It means exactly that. The HOA's control just evaporated. They tried to sell what wasn't theirs, and now the government's cleaning house." The soldiers stretched survey tape across the main road like it was any other operation. Clipboards filled with neat check marks. A generator hummed as someone tested connections. It was strangely methodical, almost boring, yet the effect on the neighborhood was anything but. People whispered, then laughed, then full-on cheered as the implications sank in. Linda, meanwhile, looked like a queen watching her crown melt. She waved her clipboard like a shield, pages flapping in the breeze. "You can't do this. We have bylaws, covenants, rules." One soldier finally looked at her, not unkind but unmoved. "Ma'am, your rules don't apply here anymore." It was like the floor gave out beneath her. That was the turning point. Neighbors who had lived in quiet fear of her fines began to step forward, voices rising. "You ruined my vegetable garden because you said tomatoes were unsightly. You sent me letters about my mailbox every week. You threatened to lien my house over a holiday wreath." The words came like a barrage, years of pent-up resentment finding release. I'd seen barracks room blowouts, but this was catharsis. Linda shrank back, clipboard pressed to her chest like a lifeline, but there was no saving her now. And then, my favorite moment, little Jimmy Miller, no more than 10, shouted from his porch, "Hey, Mom, does this mean we can finally put the basketball hoop back up?" The laughter that followed rolled through the street like thunder. I should have felt satisfied, and I did. Watching Linda Prescott stripped of her false authority was more than vindication. It was justice. But underneath the cheers, I couldn't ignore the flicker in her eyes. Humiliation, yes. Rage, definitely. But also something sharper, colder. She wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The trucks kept working, soldiers unbothered by the suburban theater unfolding around them. Linda dropped her clipboard at last, letting it hang limp at her side. For once, she had no rules left to cite, no fines to threaten, no gavel to slam. And as neighbors gathered around me, clapping my shoulder, thanking me, celebrating the fall of Maplewood Meadows' tyrant, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Linda Prescott wasn't done fighting.